I stood on my parents' porch with blood seeping through the bandage on my arm when my mother said the words that would change everything. "You've cost us enough, Avery. Find somewhere else to stay." My brother stepped beside her, arms crossed like a bouncer at an exclusive club I was being thrown out of. "We're done cleaning up your messes," he added, his voice flat and final. The mess they were talking about? The accident I'd gotten into while running errands for them. The one that left me barely able to walk and drowning in medical bills. The one they refused to help with despite having access to money my grandmother left specifically for me. My mother's hand reached for the doorknob. I tried to speak, but my throat closed. The door shut in my face with a soft click that sounded like thunder. The lock turned. I pressed my hand against the wood, feeling the world tilt sideways. My own family had just locked me out while I was still bleeding. I turned and stumbled down the steps, each movement sending pain through my leg. The night air was cold against my face. I had nowhere to go. I sat on the curb outside their house, shaking from shock more than cold. "My name is Avery Lane, and this was the night my family decided I wasn't theirs anymore." I whispered it to myself like a mantra, trying to make it real. The accident happened 3 days ago. I'd been driving to pick up supplies for my father's office party when another car ran a red light. The impact sent me spinning into a guardrail. My arm shattered. My leg twisted in ways it shouldn't. The hospital bills came immediately, and my family's sympathy dried up just as fast. They'd taken the inheritance my grandmother left me years ago, telling me it was being managed properly. Now, when I needed it most, they claimed it was gone. Spent. Unavailable. I replayed my mother's words in my head, searching for some hint of love or concern. There was none. Only irritation, like I was a problem that had finally been solved. My phone sat heavy in my pocket, but I didn't want to look at it. Who would I call? I had no one left. I tried to stand, but my vision blurred. The pain in my leg was getting worse, throbbing with each heartbeat. I needed to move, to get somewhere safe, but my body wasn't cooperating. I stumbled forward, using parked cars for balance, heading toward the main road. Maybe I could find a bus stop, a bench, anywhere to sit and think. The street was empty and dark. My breath came in short gasps as I reached the bridge that crossed over the highway. I leaned against the railing, trying to steady myself. My phone buzzed. A text from my brother, "Stop being dramatic. You'll figure it out." I stared at those words, feeling something break inside me. I tried to call my mother. The phone rang once, then went to voicemail. I tried my father. Same thing. My brother declined the call immediately. They were done with me. Really, truly done. My legs gave out, and I slid down against the concrete barrier. Cars rushed past below me, their lights blurring together. I closed my eyes, wondering if this was how it ended. A truck slowed down on the road above me. I heard a door slam, then footsteps running. "Hey, don't move. You're hurt." A man's voice, steady and kind, cut through my fog of pain. I opened my eyes to see a stranger kneeling beside me, his face creased with concern. He looked about 30, with dark hair and worried eyes. "I'm okay," I tried to say, but the words came out weak. "No, you're not," he said gently. "You're bleeding through your bandage. How long have you been out here?" I couldn't answer. He glanced at my face, then at my leg, making quick decisions. "I'm going to lift you into my truck. We need to get you to a hospital." Before I could protest, he slid one arm under my knees and another around my back. He carried me like I weighed nothing, moving carefully to avoid hurting me more. The interior of his truck was warm and clean. He buckled me in, then climbed into the driver's seat. "My name's Caleb," he said. "What's yours?" "Avery," I whispered. He nodded. "Okay, Avery. Who can I call for you?" I watched as Caleb pulled my phone from my pocket with gentle permission and dialed my mother's number. It rang once, then went straight to voicemail. He frowned and tried my brother next. My brother answered, and I heard his irritated voice through the speaker. What? Caleb explained calmly that he'd found me injured and was taking me to the hospital. She's fine, my brother said. She's just being dramatic. Then he hung up. Caleb stared at the phone for a long moment, something hardening in his expression. He set it down carefully and started the engine. Okay, he said quietly. Then I'll take you myself. The drive to the emergency room took 20 minutes. Caleb asked me simple questions to keep me awake, my favorite color, what music I liked, anything to keep me talking. I answered in fragments, still dazed. When we arrived, he helped me out of the truck and supported my weight as we walked through the automatic doors. The bright lights of the ER made me squint. A nurse rushed over with a wheelchair. What happened? She asked. Caleb explained while I sat there, feeling distant from my own body. The nurse took my vitals and asked me to rate my pain. 8, I said, though it felt closer to 10. She nodded and made notes on her clipboard. We'll get you back to a room soon. Your guardian will need to sign the intake forms. I opened my mouth to say I didn't have anyone when Caleb stepped forward. I'll sign, he said without hesitation. The nurse glanced between us, clearly noting that we looked nothing alike and probably weren't related. But something in Caleb's expression made her nod. This way, she said. In that moment, a stranger showed me more loyalty than my family had in years. He signed forms, answered questions, and stayed by my side as nurses examined my wounds. The doctor appeared, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes. She unwrapped my bandage and examined my arm. This wasn't cleaned properly, she said, frowning. You're at risk for infection. And your leg. She ordered x-rays. Caleb stood in the corner, giving me reassuring looks whenever I glanced his way. I didn't understand why he was helping me. We were complete strangers. But I was grateful beyond words. The x-rays showed a hairline fracture in my shin that hadn't been caught before. The doctor wrapped it properly and gave me a prescription for antibiotics and pain medication. You'll need physical therapy, she said, reviewing my chart. Probably 6 to 8 weeks, twice a week. Your insurance should cover most of it. I felt my stomach drop. I had insurance, but barely, the cheapest plan I could afford. The copays alone would destroy me. When the doctor left, Caleb sat down beside my bed. Where do you live? He asked. I can drive you home once they discharge you. I stared at the ceiling, feeling tears build behind my eyes. I don't have anywhere to go, I finally said. The words came out broken. My family locked me out tonight. That's why I was on the bridge. His expression shifted through several emotions, shock, anger, confusion. Your family did this? While you were injured? I nodded, and the whole story spilled out. The accident, the stolen inheritance, their refusal to help, the door closing in my face. Caleb listened without interrupting, his jaw tight. When I finished talking, Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that changed everything. You can stay with me. I blinked at him. What? My apartment, he explained. It's not much, but I have a spare room. You need somewhere safe to recover. I shook my head. I can't ask you to do that. You don't even know me. You're not asking. I'm offering, he said firmly. And I know enough. I know you need help, and I know your family failed you. That's all I need to know. Something in his voice made me believe him. When the hospital discharged me an hour later, Caleb drove me to his apartment across town. It was a modest place, clean, organized, and quiet. He showed me to a small guest room with a comfortable bed. You're safe here, he said. Rest as much as you need. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow. I sat on the edge of the bed after he left, staring at the walls of this stranger's apartment. A stranger who had shown me more kindness in one night than my family had in months. I woke up the next morning to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then the pain in my leg reminded me of everything. I checked my phone and saw 3 missed calls from my father and a text from my brother. My hand shook as I opened the message. Stop trying to guilt us. The trust fund wasn't yours to begin with. My heart dropped into my stomach. The trust fund wasn't mine? My grandmother had left it specifically for me, with explicit instructions that it was for medical emergencies and education. I'd seen the documents when I was 18. How could it not be mine? Unless they'd changed something. Unless they'd lied. I sat up carefully, my mind racing through years of conversations and deflections whenever I'd asked about the money. They'd always said it was being invested or held in a secure account. I'd trusted them because they were my family. The realization hit me like ice water, they'd been lying for years. I heard a soft knock on the door. Caleb appeared with coffee and toast. How are you feeling? He asked. Like I've been betrayed, I said quietly. Over breakfast, I explained my suspicions to Caleb. He listened carefully, then asked a question that changed everything. Do you have any documentation? Emails, letters, anything from when the trust was set up? I thought back and remembered something. My grandmother's lawyer sent me an email years ago. He said the trust was protected by specific legal provisions and that I should keep all original documents. Caleb grabbed his laptop. Let's find that email. We spent the morning digging through my old accounts. Finally, I found it, a message from 7 years ago outlining the trust's terms. The lawyer had attached a PDF of the original documents. As I read through them, my blood ran cold. The trust required my signature for any withdrawals or transfers. But I'd never signed anything. Check your bank records, Caleb suggested. See if there's any evidence of transfers. I logged into the account my parents had set up for me when I was younger. There, buried in years of statements, were transfers I'd never authorized. Large sums moving out of the trust and into accounts I didn't recognize. My signature appeared on authorization forms I'd never seen. I stared at the screen, feeling sick. They forged my signature, I whispered. Caleb leaned closer, examining the documents. Can you prove these aren't your signatures? I pulled up other documents I'd signed over the years, rental agreements, job applications, insurance forms. My real signature was distinctly different from the ones on the trust withdrawals. The forged versions were close but not exact. Someone had practiced but hadn't quite captured my handwriting. This is fraud, Caleb said quietly. You know that, right? This is actual, prosecutable fraud. I nodded, but fear crept in alongside the anger. These were my parents, my brother. Could I really take legal action against my own family? As if reading my mind, Caleb said, they already made their choice, Avery. They locked you out while you were bleeding. They stole your inheritance. They left you with nothing. He was right. They'd drawn the line, not me. I took a shaky breath. What should I do? Document everything, he said. Screenshot these statements, save the emails, keep records of every text message. Then we figure out what you want to do with it. I started saving files, creating a folder labeled evidence. My hand steadied as I worked. The next few weeks became a blur of appointments and planning. I started physical therapy twice a week, gritting my teeth through exercises that made my legs scream. Caleb drove me to every appointment, waiting patiently in lobbies with a book or his laptop. Between sessions, I worked on building my case. I contacted my grandmother's lawyer, explaining my situation. He was horrified to learn about the forged signatures and immediately requested copies of all documents. Your grandmother was very specific about protecting this trust, he told me over the phone. She didn't trust your parents with money, which is why she left it directly to you. That knowledge hurt and healed at the same time. My grandmother had known. She'd tried to protect me, and they'd circumvented her final wishes. I also started job hunting. I couldn't live off Caleb's kindness forever, and I needed income to eventually get my own place. I found a position at a local accounting firm, entry level but with room to grow. The work was straightforward, and my employers were understanding about my therapy schedule. I didn't tell my family about any of this. They still thought I was broken, desperate, and dependent on their mercy. 3 months after the accident, my life had developed a strange new rhythm. I woke up in Caleb's spare room, went to work, attended therapy, and spent evenings quietly building my case against my family. Every dollar I earned went into a new bank account they didn't know about. Every piece of evidence was backed up in multiple places. I was healing, both physically and mentally. The leg brace came off. My arm regained full strength. I started walking without limping. But I didn't tell my family. When my mother called occasionally, I made my voice sound tired and defeated. I let them think I was barely surviving, struggling to make ends meet, regretting my dramatic behavior. The truth was, I was stronger than I'd ever been. Therapy had taught me not just how to walk again, but how to stand up for myself. Caleb had shown me that people could be kind without wanting something in return. My job proved I was capable and valuable. One evening, a thick envelope arrived in the mail. It was from my grandmother's lawyer. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter that made my breath catch. The letter explained something my grandmother had never told anyone: there was a second trust. This one was structured as a failsafe, triggered only if someone tampered with the primary trust. The terms were clear: if fraud was detected, if my signature was forged, if anyone attempted to steal what was rightfully mine, the second trust would activate. And that second trust contained something powerful: shares in my father's company. Majority shares. Enough to control the entire business. My grandmother had quietly accumulated stock over decades, buying shares whenever the company was struggling, helping them weather financial storms. My parents had thought she was just being generous. In reality, she'd been building a safety net for me. The lawyer's letter continued: the detection clause has been satisfied. Evidence of forgery and unauthorized transfers confirms activation of the secondary trust provisions. As of this date, you are the majority shareholder of Whitmore Consulting, Limited. I read the words 3 times before they sank in. I owned my father's company. The business he'd built for 30 years, the source of his pride and identity, was now legally mine. I could barely breathe. I showed Caleb the documents with trembling hands. He read through them carefully, his eyes widening. This is incredible. Your grandmother planned for everything. But is it legal? I asked. Can they fight this? Let's ask the lawyer, he suggested. We called that evening, and the lawyer confirmed everything. Your grandmother worked with multiple attorneys to ensure this was ironclad. The activation clause is triggered by objective evidence, the forged signatures you've documented. There's no gray area here. You have every legal right to these shares. He paused. There's a board meeting scheduled for next month. As majority shareholder, you have the right to attend and vote on all matters, including management positions. The implication was clear. I could remove my father and brother from their positions if I chose to. The power dynamics had completely reversed. After we hung up, I sat in silence, processing everything. Caleb made tea and sat beside me. What do you want to do? He asked gently. I thought about the door closing in my face, the declined phone calls, the years of lies. I want justice, I said. Not revenge. Justice. Over the next 2 weeks, Caleb helped me prepare for the board meeting. He didn't have to, he'd already done more than anyone could ask. But he seemed to understand that I needed support, and he offered it freely. I'm proud of you, he said one evening as we reviewed documents. You could have given up that night on the bridge. Instead, you rebuilt yourself. His words made my chest tighten. This man, who'd been a complete stranger 4 months ago, had become more family to me than the people who shared my blood. Why did you stop that night? I asked suddenly. Most people would have just driven past. Caleb was quiet for a moment. My sister, he said finally. She was in an abusive relationship years ago. One night, she managed to escape and made it to a main road. She stood there for hours, and no one stopped. Eventually, she collapsed from exhaustion and exposure. Someone finally called an ambulance, but by then, he trailed off. She survived, but barely. I swore after that I'd never drive past someone who needed help. I reached over and squeezed his hand. "I'm sorry about your sister. She's doing well now," he said with a small smile. "But I think that's why I couldn't leave you there." 2 weeks before the board meeting, I received an email from my father. The subject line read, "Family discussion needed." My stomach nodded as I opened it. "Avery," it began, "I hope you're doing well. We've been thinking about you and hoping you've landed on your feet. The company has been facing some challenges lately, and we need to make some financial adjustments. There are certain asset releases that require family signatures. As you're technically listed on some of the legacy documents from your grandmother's estate, we need your authorization to proceed. I've attached the forms. Please sign and return them at your earliest convenience. Love, Dad." I read it twice, then showed Caleb. "They have no idea," I said quietly. "They think I'm desperate and easy to manipulate." "Are you going to respond?" he asked. I thought about it. "No," I decided. "Let them wonder. Let them worry about why I'm not jumping to help them." The silence would be more powerful than any response I could give. Days passed, and my father sent 2 follow-up emails, each one slightly more urgent than the last. I deleted them without responding. 1 week before the board meeting, my mother called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Avery, sweetheart," she said, her voice dripping with false warmth. "We've been so worried about you. Why haven't you responded to your father's emails?" "I've been busy," I said neutrally. "We'd love to see you," she continued. "Why don't you come over for dinner? We can talk about everything, clear the air, move forward as a family." Every instinct screamed that this was a trap, but I agreed anyway. I wanted to see their faces. I wanted to understand just how desperate they'd become. Caleb offered to drive me. "If you need to leave quickly, text me and I'll call with an emergency," he said. I arrived at my parents' house Saturday evening. My brother answered the door, and to my shock, he hugged me. "Hey, Ave," he said with forced casualness. "Good to see you." Inside, my mother had prepared my favorite meal. My father stood when I entered, smiling broadly. The entire scene felt surreal, like I'd stepped into an alternate universe where they actually cared about me. We sat down to eat, and they asked surface-level questions about my recovery. I gave vague answers. Halfway through dinner, my father cleared his throat. "Avery, about those documents I sent," he began. "I know we've had our difficulties, but family is family. We need to work together, especially now when the company is facing pressure." "What kind of pressure?" I asked innocently. He waved a hand dismissively. "Just market fluctuations, nothing serious. But to navigate them, we need access to certain reserves. That's where your signature comes in." I set down my fork carefully. "Reserves from the trust?" His expression flickered. "Yes, partially. But it's complicated. The point is, we need your cooperation." I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. My hands were steady as I slid it across the table. "What's this?" my mother asked nervously. "Documentation," I said calmly. "Of every forged signature, every unauthorized transfer, and every lie you've told me for years." The room went silent. My father opened the folder, his face draining of color as he scanned the pages. My brother leaned over to look, and I watched him go pale. "Avery, we can explain," my mother started, but her voice shook. "I'm sure you can," I said. "But you won't need to. You'll explain it to the board instead." My father's eyes snapped up. "What board?" "The board of Whitmore Consulting," I said evenly. "The company you thought you owned." Except my grandmother left shares in a secondary trust, one that activates when fraud is detected. I'm now the majority shareholder, and there's a meeting scheduled for Thursday. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My brother pushed back from the table, his chair scraping loudly. You can't do this, my father said, his voice rising. I built that company from nothing. And my grandmother helped you survive every downturn, I countered. She bought shares when you were desperate, and she left them to me, not you. She protected me because she knew I'd need protection from my own family. My mother started crying. Avery, please. We're sorry. We made mistakes, but you can't destroy your father's life over this. You destroyed mine first, I said quietly. You locked me out while I was bleeding. You stole my inheritance. You chose money over your own daughter. This isn't revenge, it's consequence. I stood up, gathering my folder. I'll see you Thursday. The board meeting starts at 10. Then I walked out, leaving them frozen in their perfect dining room. Thursday morning arrived cold and clear. I dressed carefully in a professional suit Caleb had helped me pick out. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the person staring back. 4 months ago, I'd been broken on a bridge. Now I was walking into a boardroom to take control of my future. Caleb drove me to the office building. You've got this, he said before I got out. Remember, you're not doing anything wrong. You're correcting what they did wrong. The boardroom was on the 15th floor. I arrived 15 minutes early and was greeted by my grandmother's lawyer and another attorney who specialized in corporate law. They walked me through the procedures one final time. At exactly 10 o'clock, the board members filed in. My father and brother sat at one end of the table, both looking like they hadn't slept. My mother wasn't present, she had no official role in the company. The board chairman, an older man named Harold, called the meeting to order. We have some unusual business today, he announced, looking uncomfortable. Ms. Lane has brought forward evidence of serious misconduct. I presented my documentation calmly and professionally. The forged signatures. The unauthorized transfers. The violation of trust provisions. As I spoke, I watched my father's face cycle through denial, anger, and finally resignation. My brother kept his eyes fixed on the table. The board members asked questions. I answered each one with facts and evidence. No emotion, no accusations, just the truth laid out clearly. When I finished, Harold cleared his throat. This is quite serious. The evidence appears conclusive. He turned to my father. Do you have a response? My father tried to speak several times but couldn't seem to form words. Finally, he said, it was never meant to harm Avery. We thought we were managing the money responsibly. By forging her signature? Harold asked sharply. That's not management, that's fraud. The board deliberated for 30 minutes. When they returned, Harold's expression was grave. Based on the evidence presented and Ms. Lane's position as majority shareholder, we're voting to remove both Mr. Whitmore and Mr. Whitmore Jr. from their executive positions, effective immediately. Ms. Lane will assume interim control until permanent management is established. The vote was called. It was unanimous. My father slumped in his chair. My brother finally looked at me, his eyes red. I felt no triumph, only a strange sense of closure. I'd won, but it felt hollow. After the meeting, my father approached me in the hallway. My lawyer tensed, but I nodded that it was okay. Avery, he said quietly, I know I have no right to ask, but please, don't destroy what I built. It's not just me. There are employees who depend on this company. I studied his face, seeing him clearly for the first time in years. He wasn't a monster, just a man who'd chosen wrong at every turn. I'm not going to destroy it, I said. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to run it honestly, pay people fairly, and make decisions that aren't based on greed. Everything you should have been doing. He nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. for all of it. I know, I said. But sorry doesn't change what happened. You made your choices. Now you live with them. He turned and walked away, shoulders bent like he'd aged 10 years in one morning. My brother followed without looking back. I watched them go, feeling nothing but tired relief. Outside, Caleb was waiting in his truck. I climbed in and let out a long breath. How'd it go? He asked. It's done, I said. It's finally done. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of transition. I hired a professional CEO to run the day-to-day operations while I learned the business from the ground up. I restructured the company, eliminating the shady practices my father had normalized and implementing transparent accounting. Employees who'd been quietly suffering under bad management thanked me personally. The company stabilized, then began to grow. I moved into my own apartment, finally independent. But I made sure Caleb knew he'd always have a place in my life. One Saturday, we took a walk by the lake near his apartment. It was peaceful, the water reflecting clouds and sky. Then, without warning, I felt a panic attack building. Memories hit me all at once, the accident, the pain, the door closing, the bridge. I stumbled toward the water's edge, my breath coming in gasps. Strong hands caught my shoulders. Avery, I've got you, Caleb's voice cut through the panic. I'm right here. You're safe. Breathe with me. I focused on his voice, matching my breathing to his. Slowly, the panic receded. I leaned against him, exhausted. I'm sorry, I whispered. Don't be, he said firmly. You've been through hell. You're allowed to have moments like this. Later that evening, as we sat on his balcony watching the sunset, I asked the question that had been on my mind for months. Why did you really stop that night? I know what you said about your sister, but there has to be more. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. I saw a woman who deserved help, he finally said. Someone fighting alone against something unfair. I couldn't drive past because I knew if I did, I'd be just like everyone else who'd failed you. His words settled into my chest, warm and true. My family used to say blood is thicker than water, I said softly. But they had it wrong. The full saying is the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. It means the bonds we choose are stronger than the ones we're born into. Caleb smiled. I like that version better. I looked out at the darkening sky, thinking about how far I'd come. I'd rebuilt my life from nothing, taken back control from people who'd tried to break me, and found family in the most unexpected place. My revenge hadn't been loud or cruel. It had been quiet, legal, and complete. I'd won not through anger, but through careful planning and unshakable determination. And the stranger who'd saved me? He'd become proof that loyalty isn't about blood, it's about who shows up when your world collapses. I'd lost a family. But I'd gained something more valuable, freedom, strength, and a future built on my own terms. That was enough. That was everything.